My name is Roberto Silva. For 8 years, I was a respected police officer in this city. For 15 years, I was inmate number 47,032. Today, I am a free man who discovered that loyalty has 4 paws and a heart that beats for 2 lives. This is not just the story of an injustice. It's not just another account of police corruption or planted evidence. This is the most extraordinary story about loyalty you've ever heard. And I know it sounds impossible to believe. If someone had told me 16 years ago that my fate would depend on a cell phone buried in my backyard, I would have laughed. If they had told me that my patrol partner would guard the secret of my innocence for 15 whole years, patiently waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth, I would have thought it was delirium. But that is exactly what happened. Rex was not just my police dog. He was my partner, my confidant, my only true family. For 8 years, we patrolled together through the most dangerous streets of the city. We solved cases others considered impossible. We saved lives that seemed lost. We were an unbeatable duo, until the night everything collapsed. March 26, 2008. An ambush at the abandoned warehouse in the industrial zone. I woke up with blood on my hands and a body beside me. My gun, my fingerprints, my DNA. The evidence was irrefutable. Or at least that's what everyone believed. Everyone except Rex. As I was dragged away in handcuffs, he desperately scratched at the warehouse floor, barking toward something no one else could see. For 15 years in prison, that image haunted me. For 15 years, Rex would visit me and repeat the same obsessive behavior, sniffing, scratching, looking at me with an urgency I mistook for longing. I was wrong. Rex wasn't longing for me. Rex was trying to save me. This is the story of Rex. And this is the story of how I discovered that true loyalty doesn't abandon, doesn't question, and never, ever gives up on those it loves. Because some stories are impossible to invent, and this is one of them. The prison gate closed behind me with a sound that echoed through 15 years of silence. 15 years. My feet touched the asphalt as if it were the first time, or maybe the last. There was no one waiting for me, no embrace, no words of welcome, only the taxi that would take me back to a life that no longer existed. Throughout the entire ride, a single image filled my mind. Rex, my companion, my partner, my only true family. Was he still there? Did he still remember me? The house looked smaller than I remembered. The garden had grown wild, overrun by weeds that wove themselves between the porch railings. Everything was abandoned, forgotten by time. Exactly how I felt. But then I heard it. A low whimper, almost imperceptible, coming from the back of the property. My feet moved on their own along the uneven stone path. Each step was a silent prayer, a fear swelling in my chest. And then I saw him. Rex was lying in the shade of the century-old oak tree, the same place where we used to rest after the longest shifts. He was no longer the imposing German shepherd I remembered. His fur, once golden and shiny, was now a gray, dull mantle. His eyes were veiled by a milky haze of age. But when my scent reached his nose, something magical happened. His ears perked up like antennas picking up a long-awaited signal. His head turned precisely toward me, defying his blindness. He knew. Even after 15 years, even without seeing me, he knew I had returned. "Rex," I whispered, my voice shattering like glass. He tried to stand, his hind legs trembling with the effort. I ran to him and knelt down, my hands finding that fur I had stroked so many times during our night patrols. He was thinner, frailer, but he was still my Rex. I pressed my forehead to his, feeling his warm breath against my face. Tears I had held back for 15 years finally found their way out. He gently sniffed my face, like he used to when trying to comfort me after the toughest cases. "I'm sorry, boy," I murmured into his fur. "I'm sorry it took me so long." Rex let out a low sound, almost as if forgiving me. But there was something more in his behavior, a familiar restlessness, an urgency I recognized from the old days. His muscles tensed beneath my hands, and he tried to move toward the oak tree. In that moment, I felt our reunion was not just an ending. It was the beginning of something he had kept for all these years, something only he knew, and that he could finally show me. 8 years. For 8 years, Rex and I were more than partners. We were a unit, a well-oiled machine that worked with the precision of a Swiss watch. As I stroked his graying head, memories came back like waves crashing against sharp rocks. I remember the first day we were introduced. Rex was only 2 years old, a young German shepherd with intelligent eyes that seemed to see straight through your soul. The trainer said he had been rejected by 3 other officers, too stubborn, too independent. But when we looked at each other for the first time, something clicked. It was as if we were recognizing one another. Our night patrols were a silent dance through the city streets. Rex didn't need verbal commands. A gesture, a glance, and he knew exactly what to do. He saved my life more times than I can count, detecting hidden drugs, warning me about armed suspects, sniffing out explosives in abandoned cars. But Rex was more than a police dog. He was my confidant on the nights we came home weighed down by failures. He was the one who comforted me when we couldn't save a victim, when justice failed, when the system crumbled before our eyes. In a profession where trust was a dangerous luxury, Rex was my only certainty. We were respected in the force. Silva and Rex, they called us. We had the highest case resolution rate in the precinct. Drug traffickers whispered our names in fear. We were incorruptible, relentless in our pursuit of the truth. Until that night, March 26, 2008. An anonymous tip about a suspicious meeting at the abandoned warehouse in the industrial zone. Routine for us. Or it should have been. Rex was restless during the drive, sniffing the air more intensely than usual. I should have paid more attention to the signs. We entered the building following protocol. Rex in front, me covering our rear. The silence was heavy, unnatural. Rex stopped abruptly, his ears perked up. He growled softly, a warning I knew well. That's when the world exploded in my head. I woke up hours later on the cold floor of the warehouse, with the metallic taste of blood in my mouth and a throbbing pain in my skull. My hands. God, my hands were covered in blood that wasn't mine. Rex was a few feet away, barking desperately, scratching at the concrete near the west wall. Rex! My voice came out hoarse, confused. What happened? He ran to me, sniffed my bloody hands and went back to the wall, scratching with greater urgency. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't obey. My head spun like a runaway carousel. That's when I saw the body. Marcus Rodriguez, an informant who had come to me the previous week with information about a corruption scheme inside the police force itself. He was lying a few feet away from me, a bullet in his forehead, my service weapon next to his body. Rex kept scratching at the wall, barking at something I couldn't see. His nails were bleeding, but he didn't stop. It was as if he were trying to show me something urgent, desperate. But then the sirens arrived, red and blue lights flooding the warehouse, and my life as I knew it came to an end. The handcuffs closed around my wrists as Rex was dragged away, still barking, still trying to tell me something I would never understand. Until now. The cell measured 2 meters by 3. I know, because I counted every centimeter 1,000 times during those first sleepless nights. The gray walls became my universe, my horizon, my reality. In the first year, I still believed the truth would prevail. By the second, I began to question my own memory. By the third, I learned that hope can be the cruelest of torturers. Ex-cop in prison. The word sounded like a death sentence. There was no refuge, no anonymity. Every meal was a silent war. Every shower a negotiation for survival. I learned to walk along the walls, to sleep with one eye open, to turn my pain into an invisible armor. But it was the loneliness that almost broke me. In the first weeks, I talked to myself just to hear a familiar voice. I told the wall stories about our cases, about the nights Rex and I patrolled the empty streets. Gradually, my own voice became a strange whisper I no longer recognized. The other prisoners avoided me as if I carried a plague. Some out of fear, others out of hate. Corrupt cop, they muttered through the halls. If they knew I was more victim than culprit, maybe they would have felt pity. But pity wasn't a luxury that existed within those walls. By the 4th year, I began questioning my own sanity. I stayed awake through the nights, replaying every detail of that fatal evening, searching for something I might have missed. The blow to my head had erased crucial moments, leaving only confusing fragments and blood on my hands. That's when the visits began. The first time I saw Rex through the bars of the visiting room, my heart nearly stopped. He had grown, his muscles were more defined, but his eyes carried the same unshakable loyalty as always. My neighbor, Mrs. Marta, had offered to care for him when I was imprisoned, a saint I could never repay properly. "Rex," I called, and he ran toward me with the same energy as ever. But something was different. During the entire visit, Rex behaved strangely. He couldn't stay still, sniffed obsessively at the floor, scratched at the concrete always in the same direction, southeast, as if pointing to something beyond those walls. I thought it was separation anxiety, guilt over abandonment. I interpreted it as longing. The visits became regular. Mrs. Marta brought Rex every 2 months, and he always displayed the same compulsive behavior. He scratched the floor until his nails bled, sniffed with an intensity bordering on despair, looked at me with an urgency that tore my soul apart. "What is it, boy?" I whispered, pressing my hand against the glass that separated us. "What are you trying to tell me?" He barked softly, a sound I had known since our earliest days together. It was his alert bark, the same he used when he found evidence during our investigations. But here, there were no crimes to solve. Only 2 souls separated by an injustice I couldn't comprehend. As the years passed, I watched Rex grow older through those painful visits. His movements became slower, his fur began to turn gray, but his urgency never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger. It was as if time were running out, as if he carried a burden only I could relieve. The guilt consumed me, not just for being wrongfully imprisoned, but for failing to understand what my most faithful partner was trying to communicate. I had failed him the same way the system had failed me. Rex trusted me to decipher his signals, to understand his silent language, and I was failing miserably. On the darkest nights, when despair threatened to swallow me whole, I clung to a single certainty. Rex had never doubted me. Even when the entire world condemned me, even when I myself began to question my innocence, those loyal eyes never showed anything but unconditional love. He knew something, and I had to live long enough to find out what it was. 3 in the morning, the hour when demons whisper the loudest. For 15 years, I woke up religiously at this same time, sweating and breathless, with fragments of that fatal morning hammering in my mind like nails being driven into wet wood. The memory always began the same way, my eyes opening on the cold warehouse floor, the pain throbbing in my head like a broken heart. But as the years passed, details I had ignored began to emerge from the shadows, like photographs slowly revealed in a dark room. Rex wasn't just agitated that morning. He was desperate. While I tried to comprehend the nightmare my life had become, Rex scratched the concrete with an urgency that should have alarmed me. His claws were bleeding, his eyes fixed on a specific spot on the west wall. He barked in a way I had never heard before. It wasn't fear. It wasn't a danger alert. It was frustration. Pure frustration from someone with something crucial to communicate who wasn't being understood. How could I have been so blind? For 8 years, our partnership had been built on a silent language that transcended words. A flick of an ear meant, "Be careful." A specific tail posture indicated, "Drugs detected." A sustained look meant, "Trust me." We were 2 organisms functioning as one brain, 2 hearts beating in the same rhythm. But that morning, when I needed that connection most, I failed completely. In my sleepless prison nights, I replayed every second of those final moments of freedom. Rex had sniffed at the west wall for what seemed like hours. It wasn't casual sniffing. It was methodical, obsessive, like when he located drugs hidden in secret compartments. He knew something was there, and I ignored him. I was too busy trying to understand how I had woken up with blood on my hands, how my gun had ended up beside a body, how my entire life was collapsing in real time. Rex was trying to show me the solution, and I was too blind to see it. The guilt ate away at my stomach like acid, not only for being wrongfully imprisoned, but for failing my partner at the most critical moment of our lives. Rex trusted me to understand his signals, to be his translator in the human world, and when he needed me most, I abandoned him. During prison visits, that same behavior repeated. Rex always sniffed toward the southeast, always scratched at the ground, always looked at me with that desperate urgency. Now I understood. He wasn't trying to show me where he was. He was trying to show me where we needed to go. The pieces began to fit together like fragments of a broken mirror. On the morning after the crime, Rex wasn't just agitated by the situation. He had discovered something. Something important enough to hold his attention, even with sirens approaching, even with flashing lights, even with his human partner being handcuffed. I vaguely remember him being dragged away by paramedics while I was taken by the police. He barked incessantly, fought against the leash, tried to get back to that wall. At the time, I interpreted it as loyalty. He didn't want to abandon me. But that wasn't it. Rex had found the proof of my innocence and was being forced away from it. The century-old oak tree in my backyard appeared constantly in my dreams during those years. It was strange, because the crime hadn't happened there. But Rex always went beneath that tree during the imaginary visits I created in my mind to keep my sanity. Now, looking into his eyes, clouded by age yet still shining with purpose, I finally understood. All the clues were there, waiting for me to be smart enough to connect them. Rex hadn't been trying to comfort me for those 15 years. He had been waiting for me to come home, waiting for me to finally pay attention, waiting to show me what he had safeguarded all those years. The truth was there, in the place he had always tried to point me toward. And now, at last, I was ready to listen. The lawyer arrived on a rainy Tuesday of the 14th year. Daniel Moreira wasn't like the others who had visited me, young idealists full of empty promises or cynical veterans charging for hopes they knew were false. Daniel had something different in his eyes. Determination mixed with genuine outrage. "There's something wrong with your case, Silva," he said, spreading documents across the table between us. "Very wrong." My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. 15 years of disillusionment had taught me not to trust pretty words. Still, there was something in the way he organized the papers that sparked a flame I thought had died. "The key witness changed their testimony 3 times, Daniel continued, pointing to the transcripts. "The ballistic evidence has inconsistencies no one questioned. And most importantly, I discovered that Marcus Rodriguez had arranged to meet with an investigative journalist the morning after the murder. He was about to hand over information about police corruption. Each word fell like stones into a still pond, creating ripples that spread into forgotten corners of my mind. Police corruption. That was exactly what Marcus had mentioned at our last meeting. A scheme involving planted evidence, bought testimonies, and cases buried in exchange for money. "How long?" I managed to ask, my voice coming out rougher than expected. 6 months, maybe less. I have contacts in the public prosecutor's office willing to reopen the investigation. 6 months. After 15 years, 6 months felt both like an eternity and the blink of an eye. But one question terrified me more than any hope. Was Rex still waiting? Mrs. Marta had stopped bringing him to visits 2 years ago. Her advanced age made the trips difficult, she explained over the phone. But I knew there was more behind that decision. Rex was old, perhaps sick. The thought of him dying while I was still imprisoned consumed me at night. The final months in prison were psychological torture. Each day brought updates about the case's progress. New testimonies collected, forensic analyses redone, witnesses confronted with their contradictions. The system that had wrongfully condemned me was now fighting against itself to set me free. But along with hope came paralyzing fear. What if Rex had given up waiting? What if 15 years had been too long? What if I were released only to discover I had lost the one soul that had always believed in my innocence? During those final weeks, I began to feel something strange. In the early hours when the prison was plunged in silence, I felt a familiar presence. It was as if Rex were calling me across the distance, an invisible connection transcending the concrete walls and the miles between us. It wasn't imagination. It was too real to be the product of a tired mind. I felt his restlessness, his growing urgency. It was as if he knew my freedom was near and was preparing for something he had kept all those years. "He's waiting for me," I murmured to the empty cell walls one night. "Rex is waiting for me." On the morning Daniel arrived with the release papers, I felt no surprise. Somehow I already knew. Rex had called me the night before, stronger than ever. It was time to go home. "Ready to leave?" Daniel asked, smiling for the first time since we had met. 15 years, I replied. But my mind was already running toward the backyard, toward the century-old oak, toward the eyes that had never doubted me. Rex was waiting for me, and finally, I was ready to hear what he had to tell me. The house was no longer the same. 15 years of abandonment had turned what was once my home into a skeleton draped in ivy and melancholy. Paint peeled from the walls like dead skin, the windows clouded with dust and time. The garden I had once tended with pride was now a miniature jungle, weeds growing between the stones of the path. But none of that mattered. There was only one thing I needed to see. My feet moved automatically along the familiar trail, even as the overgrowth tried to erase decades of memories. Each step was a silent prayer, a fear growing in my chest like a tumor. 15 years is an eternity in a dog's life. 15 years is long enough to... I stopped thinking. I couldn't allow fear to paralyze me now, not when I was so close. That's when I heard it. A low whimper, almost imperceptible, coming from the back of the property. My heart stopped for a second before exploding in a wild race against my ribs. I ran as I hadn't run in decades, stumbling over fallen branches, scratching myself on the plants that had conquered the path. And then I saw him. Rex was lying in the shade of the century-old oak tree, exactly where we used to rest after our longest shifts. But the dog looking at me was no longer the imposing German shepherd I remembered. He was thin, his golden coat now completely gray, his hind legs trembling even as he lay there. His eyes were veiled by a milky haze that spoke of years I hadn't been there to witness. But when my scent reached his nose, something magical happened. His ears perked up like antennas catching a long-awaited signal. His head turned toward me with a precision that defied his blindness. Even without seeing me, even after all those years, he knew. Rex knew I had come back. "Rex," I whispered, my voice breaking like glass. He tried to get up, his hind legs failing twice before he managed to steady himself. I rushed to him and knelt, my hands finding that fur I had stroked thousands of times during our night patrols. He was thinner, frailer, but he was still my Rex. I pressed my forehead against his, feeling his warm breath on my face. Tears I had held back for 15 years finally found their way out. Rex gently sniffed my face, as he used to when trying to console me after the toughest cases. That simple gesture completely dismantled the last defenses I had built around my heart. "I'm sorry, boy," I murmured into his fur. "I'm sorry it took me so long. I'm sorry I didn't understand." Rex let out a low sound, almost as if forgiving me. But then, something familiar awoke in his tired muscles. The same urgency I remembered from the prison visits, the same restlessness that haunted me through countless nights. He gently pulled away from my embrace and positioned himself facing the oak tree. His paws scratched the ground once, twice, in that same obsessive way I remembered. Even blind, even weak, Rex knew exactly where he wanted to go. "What is it, boy?" I asked, though my voice carried a comprehension that hadn't existed years ago. "What are you trying to show me?" Rex turned to me, and for a moment, the haze in his eyes seemed to lift. It was as if all the wisdom gathered during our years of partnership had concentrated into that single look. He barked once, a low, determined sound, full of purpose. Then he began to walk toward the oak tree with a determination that seemed impossible for his frail body. Each step was deliberate, every movement filled with meaning. Rex wasn't just moving, he was guiding me. I rose and followed him, my intuition telling me this was the moment we had both waited for over 15 years. The moment our destinies would finally align again. The moment Rex could deliver the message he had faithfully guarded for an entire lifetime. There was urgency in the air, as if time were running out, as if this were our last chance to fix something that had been broken for too long. Rex knew something I needed to uncover, and he was determined to show me, even if it cost him his last strength. We walked together toward the base of the oak tree, two old partners reunited for one final mission. Rex stopped in front of the century-old oak and sniffed the ground with a precision that defied his blindness. Even with clouded eyes, even with trembling legs, he knew exactly where he was. 15 years had passed, but his memory remained intact, guarding a secret only he knew. He scratched the soil once, twice. His nails, worn down by age, began to bleed, but he didn't stop. The same obsession I had witnessed in the warehouse during the prison visits now made sense. Rex wasn't being compulsive. Rex was working. "It's here, isn't it?" I whispered, kneeling beside him. "This is what you were trying to show me all these years." Rex gave a low bark, that familiar sound of confirmation I knew so well. I began digging with my hands next to him, the cold earth sticking beneath my nails. 15 years of unanswered questions, 15 years of injustice, 15 years of a secret buried just a few meters from my own home. With each handful of earth removed, my heart beat faster. Rex kept digging, even when his strength was clearly running out. His determination was absolute, as if his entire existence had led to this moment. Then my fingers touched something solid. Plastic. A plastic bag buried about half a meter deep, protected from moisture and time. With trembling hands, I pulled the package from the earth. Inside, perfectly preserved, was a cell phone. "My God," I murmured, looking at Rex with a mix of disbelief and admiration. "You knew. You always knew." Rex lay down heavily beside me, his mission finally accomplished. His blind eyes turned toward me, and even without seeing, I felt that he was smiling. That look I had interpreted as desperation all these years wasn't desperation. It was determination. It was the silent promise of a partner who would never abandon his companion. I powered on the phone with fingers that could barely stop trembling. The battery was dead, of course, but I didn't need to see it working to understand what had happened. This was Marcus Rodriguez's phone. The phone he carried the night he was murdered. The phone the real killer tried to hide, but that Rex had found. The pieces finally fell into place. That fatal night, while I was unconscious, Rex had seen everything. He saw the killer plant the evidence, saw him try to hide the phone. But Rex was smarter. As the sirens approached, as chaos unfolded, my loyal companion retrieved the one piece of proof of my innocence and brought it home, to the safest place he knew, beneath the oak where we had spent our quietest hours. "You tried to tell me," I whispered, stroking his graying head. "For 15 years, you tried to show me, and I didn't understand." Rex was breathing heavily beside me, each rise of his chest a visible effort. But in his clouded eyes, there was a peace I hadn't seen in decades. The peace of someone who had completed his mission, who had kept the most important promise of his life. I pressed my forehead to his again, feeling 15 years of guilt dissolve like sugar in the rain. Rex hadn't abandoned me during my imprisonment. He had guarded my salvation, waiting patiently for the day I would come home and finally pay attention. "Forgive me, boy," I whispered into his fur. "Forgive me for not listening. Forgive me for taking so long to understand." Rex let out a low sound, a whimper that seemed to carry all the love and loyalty accumulated over an entire lifetime. It wasn't a whimper of pain. It was of relief. The relief of someone who could finally rest after carrying a burden for far too long. The cell phone in my hands was more than evidence. It was proof of a loyalty that transcended time, distance, and injustice. It was the demonstration that some bonds are unbreakable, that true love waits as long as it must, that the truth always finds a way. Rex had guarded more than my innocence. He had preserved my faith in loyalty, in unconditional love, in the certainty that we are never truly alone when we have someone who believes in us. Now, at last, I could hear the message he had been trying to deliver to me for 15 years. "I never doubted you, and I will never give up on you." Rex passed away 3 days later. There was no agony, no suffering. On a sunny spring morning, he simply lay down in the shade of the century-old oak and decided it was time to rest. I was at his side, my hand stroking his graying fur, when I felt his breathing become slower, more peaceful. "Thank you, boy," I whispered into his ear. "Thank you for never giving up on me." His eyes closed for the last time, but there was no sadness in that moment. There was completion. Rex had fulfilled his most important mission, proving I was innocent. Now, at last, he could rest. Marcus's phone contained exactly what I had imagined. A full recording of the murder, captured accidentally when the phone fell during the struggle. The voice of the real killer, Detective Carlos Mendoza, my former partner, was clearly audible, confessing the crime and describing how he had drugged me and planted the evidence. Mendoza's arrest made national headlines. "Police officer exonerated after 15 years of wrongful imprisonment," the newspaper shouted. The system that had condemned me now bowed in public apologies. Compensation was offered, tributes suggested, but none of that truly mattered. The real victory wasn't in the courts or the newspaper headlines. It was in those last moments I spent with Rex, seeing the peace in his eyes when he realized his mission was complete. True justice wasn't my official freedom. It was discovering that during the darkest 15 years of my life, I was never truly alone. Rex hadn't only safeguarded the proof of my innocence, he had preserved something far more precious. My faith in unconditional loyalty, in the certainty that true love doesn't abandon, doesn't question, and never grows tired of waiting. During those years in prison, when I questioned everything about human nature, when bitterness threatened to consume my soul, Rex kept alive a flame I didn't even know still existed. Each visit was a silent reminder that some bonds transcend time, distance, and circumstance. Today, 6 months after his funeral, I visit him every day. I planted flowers around his grave, beneath the oak where our story began and ended. Sometimes I bring his favorite toy. Sometimes I just sit in silence, remembering the 8 years we patrolled the city streets together. The garden is different now, tended, organized, alive again. It's my way of honoring his memory, turning abandonment into beauty, pain into growth, injustice into something meaningful. Sometimes, when the wind stirs the oak's leaves, I feel that Rex is still here, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a legacy, as living proof that true loyalty doesn't end with death. It transforms into example, into inspiration, into the certainty that genuine love leaves marks time cannot erase. Rex taught me that redemption doesn't always come when we expect it, but always comes when we need it most. That some mysteries are kept by the purest hearts until we're ready to understand them. That true partnership isn't just being side by side during easy moments, but carrying another's burden when he can't carry it himself. He waited 15 years to deliver the truth to me, and I will spend the rest of my life honoring the loyalty he taught me. Some bonds are unbreakable. Rex was living proof of that. Rex,